the boy Blackbeard. I'm back. What's happening? About to go into another Midnight Mirage history lesson. So ladies and gentlemen, get your pen and paper out because you're probably going to have some homework assignments. You're going to have some things to look up in this tape. Some of the topics and subjects we're going to talk about is manifest destiny. We're going to talk about the Anglo-Christian Crusaders. We're going to talk about the Caliphate or the Californian Aboriginals. And we will basically talk about how the entire United States history has been and is European Christian Crusaders versus Aboriginal American Hebrews / Saracens. Okay, so we're going to talk about a variety of things in this tape, but basically what we want to look at is how these Christian, Europeans used a lot of papal bulls, and they used a lot of, I guess they can call decrees or orders from their so-called God, that they have the right and it is their destiny to steal the lands of all the Aboriginal peoples in the ancient city and the holy city of Jerusalem. Okay, so previously I made 2 tapes that talked about how the Catholic Church sacked Jerusalem or destroyed Jerusalem, how the Catholic Church destroyed Jerusalem. I need you to go look at that tape in the playlist. It's called How the Catholic Church Destroyed Jerusalem. Look up that tape, and also look up the tape that I made earlier in the year that deals with the Holy Crusades. Okay, so it's 2 tapes you need to look up. You need to first look up the tape that I did that deals with the Holy Crusades, which was early in 2000 and early last year. It was early 2017. Look up the tape on the Holy Crusades, and then I want you to look up the tape on how the Catholic Church destroyed Jerusalem or the Holy City. Now, in order to understand this a little bit, I'm going to have to read an example of a papal bull, which is called the Dum Diversas. It's called the Dum Diversas, Dumdiversas. And in English, this means until different. Okay, but initially it was probably written in Latin. So first we're going to have to read the Dum Diversas, which means in English until different. Now, it's very, very interesting how it says until different, because this means it's going to be in perpetuity, or it's going to be perpetual. And you will see me also use the word perpetual again in a minute. But, it's almost like, if you're on punishment and you did something wrong and you go ask your mom or your dad, well, when do I get off punishment? And then they'll say, well, until I say so. So this papal bull called the Dum Diversas, which in English means until different, translate out of the Latin, I want to say. This is almost like the Catholic Church and the Pope saying that what I am going to issue in this papal bull will be done in perpetual fashion, meaning that there is not a particular end date to this. So what I'm about to read to you all is something very, very critical, because I still see a lot of Aboriginal brothers out there want to kind of argue and fight with each other over stuff that's very, very simple and very, very stupid. But today I've had a pretty great awakening within myself, because I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of researching today, a lot of spiritual enlightenment today. And, this thing is a whole lot more serious than we can ever imagine. I'll say this and then I'll go ahead into my reading. I want another homework assignment for you to do. I want you to look up all the wars in the United States from 1776 all the way to 2018. That is your third homework assignment. So your first homework assignment is to look up the tape about how the Catholic Church sacked Jerusalem. The second tape is to look up the one on the Holy Crusades. And your third homework assignment is to look up all the wars that the United States has been in since 1776. And when you look at all these wars, you're going to see a lot of different Native American names and Native American tribes. They were fighting throughout the East, the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, all the way up until we go into the West, which is the manifest destiny. Now, in this tape, we're going to talk a little bit about the conflicts that was going on in California when these Germanic tribes that were living in the Americas encountered our ancestors out in the far West. And a lot of them went out there with aspirations of gold. But as I said, these people were Christian Crusaders, and these people are nomads with no civilization, and they are herder type people. Okay, they are hunter and gathering type people. So they were always looking for a civilization and a culture to thrive and to live inside of, and to, migrate into and to steal, and then to exterminate the people that live in that area. Okay, so that is what happened in Manifest Destiny. So in this tape, you will kind of get some of what was going on in some of the later wars in the 1800s when it comes to the United States going far out west. But nevertheless, go look up the United States wars from about 1776 up until now, and you will see all these different Native American names and Native American tribes that they were fighting against. And those are the ancestors of you so-called black people today. So you come from one of these various, Native American tribes or Aboriginal American tribes. And you just need to let that sink in your chest that the United States government has been fighting you since 1776. So let's go into the Dum Diversas. As I said, this is in English, Dum Diversas, and it means until different. The Dum Diversas is a papal bull issued on June 18th, 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to conquer Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. Let me reread this whole sentence. Dum Diversas, or until different, is a papal bull issued on June 18th, 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to conquer Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. Now, you see right here, you have one of these Germanic tribe, so-called popes, issuing something called a papal bull in the summer of 1452. So this is about, about 40 some years before the Saracens or the Aboriginals are kicked out of Southern Europe. Okay. So as you can see, they're already leading into this political campaign to go against our ancestors or the Afro-Asiatics of Southern Europe. But anyway, this Pope issued this papal bull, and it authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to conquer the Saracens and the pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. Now, we just talked about what perpetual is. Perpetual means that it's just going to go on, and it can go on even into eternity. And servitude, we already know what that is. Okay, that is being in a slavish or serving position. All right. So they say that they're going to conquer the Saracens and the pagans. So when we talk about the Holy Crusades and when we talk about the manifest destiny, this is to conquer the lands, the ownership and possessions of the Saracens. Okay. Now listen up. The concept of consignment of exclusive spheres of influence to certain nation states was extended to the Americas in 1493 by Pope Alexander VI with Inter Caetera. So right now I'm going to just read you a little bit more about this papal bull called the Dum Diversas, which you can just find on Google real quick to read. And the reason why I'm reading this is so you'll understand why the conflicts were the way they were when I go into this manifest destiny in the West. Okay. Real quick, too, you hear me using the word Saracens. OK, and a lot of people see that in literature and you wonder, where does this word Saracen come from? The word Saracen refers to the Aboriginal people who are the sons and daughters or the offspring of the mythical Abraham and Sarah of the Old Testament. Let me repeat. The Saracens. Okay, the Saracens are the sons and daughters of the mythical Abraham and Sarah of the Old Testament. Okay, so that means that the Saracens have been around since the days of the Old Testament. The Saracens were around in the days of the Holy Crusades, and the Saracens were around also in the invasion of the Americas when the Spaniards made their attempt to sack the Holy City. This is what I want to put out here real quick so we can go on to the next thing. When you hear the word Moor, when you hear the word Aboriginal, when you hear the word Autochthon, when you hear the word Hebrew, when you hear the word Saracen, or if you hear any of the various so-called Native American tribes, all these terms actually are talking about the Aboriginal people in the West. Okay, the Aboriginal Americans. So they refer to even us as Saracens. Okay. So this is also showing you a connection to the name Moors and the Saracens and the so-called Hebrews. OK, because think about it. Why would they be calling Muslims, which really just mean people of the faith? Ultimately, it doesn't really have anything to do with a certain religion. And even Muslims are just an extension of the Hebrew family. But anyway, why would they be calling Muslims Saracens if Saracens really are just the offspring of Abraham and Sarah from the Old Testament? So it's showing you that connection between the Afro-Asiatics of Southern Europe and the Aboriginal Americans of the West. Okay. And it is using the mythical story of the Old Testament and the Hebrew lineage of Abraham and Sarah. All right. Hopefully that made a little sense. So listen up. To confirm the Portuguese trade rights, King Afonso appealed to Pope Nicholas V for support, seeking the moral authority of the church for his monopoly. The Bull of 1452 was addressed to Afonso V and conceded Portugal's right to attack, conquer, and subjugate Saracens and pagans. So let me go into this real quick. Now, when the Catholic Church and this Holy Crusade by these Germanic tribes, when they were invading Southern Europa, taking down and dismantling the Holy Roman Empire, and even attacking certain aspect of the Osmanli or the Ottoman Empire. This was being done by the amalgamated nations of so-called Spain and Portugal. Now, when you look into some of the early American invasions, when you're dealing with the Aztecs against these invasive so-called Spaniards, this is still the same Spain and Portugal Catholic Church operation, Jesuit operation that we're talking about. Okay. And to wrap this up, the Papal Bull. We grant you, kings of Spain and Portugal, by these present documents, with our Apostolic Authority, full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and pagans and any other unbelievers and enemies of Christ, wherever they may be, as well as their kingdoms, duchies, counties, principalities, and other property, and to reduce their persons into perpetual servitude. So this is what this Pope told the King of Spain and the King of Portugal to do. He's saying that by these present documents and our apostolic authority, meaning that he is the vicar of Christ, or basically the word of God, or the ambassador of God, or the representative of God on earth. Okay. This is how they view the Pope. That's why it says the apostolic authority. It says that you have full and free permission to invade, search out, capture, and subjugate the Saracens and any other unbelievers and enemies of Christ. And then it says to take over their kingdoms, counties, principalities, and other properties, and to reduce their persons into perpetual servitude. Now, you so-called black people in America, don't you feel like somebody has invaded you, searched you out, captured you, subjugated you, took your kingdom, changed your county names, changed your principalities, changed your Aboriginal names? Don't you feel like somebody did that to you? So next, what we're doing now is we're going to go into a book called Extermination Them, written accounts of the murder, rape, and slavery of Native Americans during the California Gold Rush, 1848 through 1868, edited by Clifford Traveser. Okay, that's Clifford Traveser. You spell his last name Trafzer. So the name of the book that I'm about to go into is called Extermination Them, written accounts of the murder, rape, and slavery of Native Americans during the California Gold Rush, 1848 through 1868. And that is edited by Clifford Traveser. His first name Clifford, like Clifford the Big Red Dog. Last name Traveser, Trafzer. And one more time, the name of the book, Extermination Them, written accounts of the murder, rape, and slavery of Native Americans during the California Gold Rush, 1848 through 1868, edited by Clifford Traveser. So another thing you will see in history is that these people, these Spaniards and these Catholic Church Germanic tribes, they had a lot of aspirations of finding this holy city of gold. In a lot of the mythologies, it was called Atlantis. It was called Lemuria Mu. It may have been called Amaru Maru. But what you all know of it as is Jerusalem. Okay. The ancient city of Jerusalem was also known as the ancient city of gold. Okay. And it was known as this city that had the streets paved with gold. Have you all ever heard that before? Well, believe it or not, people, once again, that's, showing you that the Catholic Church wanted to take over the Americas and steal all the gold of the Aboriginal Americans. Okay. So all that gold that is sitting in so-called Fort Knox right now, all the gold that the Zionist Germanic tribes have stolen from the Aboriginal people of America and have faked and used it as the gold to back up their paper fiat currency. This is actually stolen gold from the Aztec Empire, the Mayan Empire, the Incan Empire, the Peru Empire, and the different various Aboriginal tribes and Aboriginal kingdoms that were found here in the Americas. It was all stolen. Okay, but it was because it was part of the Dum Diversas and the Papal Bulls to actually subjugate and steal the possessions of the Aboriginal. So what I'm gonna do right now is just read you all some of the conflicts and some of the real accounts of what was going on out west. So if you are a so-called black person that lives in California right now, Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, New Mexico, Texas, basically anywhere out west right now, you can listen up pretty close because we're going directly into your own history. We're also going a little bit into the history of the 49ers in San Francisco and why they are associated with the gold as well. Because if you notice, the 49ers color is what? It is a maroon color and gold, right? Or more of a burgundy color and gold, right? So that burgundy almost represents the copper colored people out there. And then the gold is the gold that they owned. Don't we know about Queen Khalifa, the Aboriginal Queen Khalifa of the Far West? Haven't you heard of the Caliphate in the Islamic or the Muslim Empire? The people of faith, the Caliphates. Okay. So Khalifa or California, once again, this is ancient Aboriginal America. So let's go into this. Killing Indians. Indian miners underwent dramatic changes during and after 1849. That year, people from all over the globe flooded into California. Thousands of, now once again, these people that they're going to be naming these different, names, these are all Germanic tribes, or basically the Caucasoid people, or whatever you want to call them. The pale-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, red-haired, green-eyed people. This is who we talking about. So it says thousands of Americans, French, Germans, Italians, Chinese, Chileans, Englishmen, Australians, and Mexicans converged on the mines, hoping to obtain wealth beyond their wildest dreams. So let me pause real quick because I don't want you all confused. So here, when I'm saying the Americans, French, Germans, Italians, Chinese, Chileans, Englishmen, Australians, and Mexicans, I'm talking about all the various Germanic tribes of the pale-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, red-haired, green-eyed people. Okay, and that archetype or that prototype mutated into even what you all know of as the pale-skinned Chinese person. Okay, and it also mutated into what you all know of as a so-called Spaniard, or even what later day turned into the so-called Mexican even. But as far as the pale-skinned root, it all comes from one of those Germanic tribes, as I've talked about in the previous tape, as long as he's a mankey. Let's keep going. Even other Indians, including Cherokees and Wyandots, hurried to California to stake a claim. The influx of people brought a sharp increase of disease to the region, devastating the indigenous peoples of California. Expanded mining activity disrupted the lives of thousands of Indians who had chosen not to participate in the gold rush, but continued to lead traditional lives. For these native men, women, and children of California's interior, their traditional food supplies sharply decreased and their streams became polluted. Lawless foreign adventurers appropriated Indian lands in order to uncover new gold deposits. The recent arrivals also considered native miners a menace, human obstacles to their own prosperity. Soon, many newcomers viewed all Indians negatively and sought to exterminate them. Open conflict between the two groups resulted. So what we have right here is that these Caucasians, under these Christian Crusaders, like I said, they are a civilization-less, empire-less, kingdom-less people These are hunter and gathering people that have no home. So they're always going to somebody else's stuff trying to steal it. But either way it goes, when they started going out west, this brought about a lot of diseases. Okay. And it started to have a lot of conflict because people are now trying to go in there and steal gold and people thinking that they got rights to stuff. Okay. So, of course, this is going to start rising in problems between the Aboriginals and all these foreign people coming in with trying to take their stuff. So let's go into a conflict. In March 1849, a party of prospectors from Oregon attacked a Maidu village on the American River. These white invaders sexually assaulted many Maidu women and shot some of the Maidu men who attempted to intervene. Soon thereafter, Maidu warriors descended on a party of Oregon miners on the Middle Fork of the American River and killed 5 of them. About 20 white men from Oregon retaliated by forming a mob. This group of ruffians stormed an Indian village on Weber's Creek, killing at least 12 Native Americans and taking several prisoners. The Oregonians later brutally murdered 8 of the Indian hostages. One visitor to California named William McCullum contended that whites from Oregon generally hunt Indians as they would wild beasts. James Marshall, who ascertained that many of the prisoners were his employees, was furious. The men from Oregon threatened Marshall's life and he retreated. George Parsons, a contemporary biographer of Marshall, asserted that the Native Americans butchered by the Oregon mob belonged to a different tribe of Indians than those who killed the 5 miners from Oregon. This mattered little to the whites from Oregon, who blamed all Indians for the killings and indiscriminately retaliated against Native people. So let's go through this situation real quick. So in March of 1849, you had a group of prospectors, these Caucasian Germanic prospectors from in the area of Oregon, so-called calling themselves looking for gold, and come across a Aboriginal group in the Maidu village on the American River. And it says that these white invaders had sexually assaulted the Maidu women. So here you have one of these accounts of the rapes. You find this a lot in a lot of these books. They talk about the different raids on these villages and them raping the women. I find that very, very interesting because it's just funny how, they got like let's say the whole swirling movement now. But you got to remember, every so-called black female you see swirling is an Aboriginal American or a so-called Native American. And it was her ancestors that was being killed and raped and pillaged against their will. And now here we are just a few hundred years later, her willingly giving herself to these same Germanic barbarians. It's amazing, man. So anyway, let's go to the next one I want to get y'all to. Give me a second. So as you can see, the root of a lot of these problems stem from these Caucasian people and their hunter and gatherer mentalities and want to go out west and try to find gold because they have no home. Okay. They have no home. So when you go into anyone else's territory and call yourself trying to take their stuff, you're going to always have issues. All right. So listen up to this. White militia groups during the 1860s continued to hunt down and destroy native peoples. In 1860, whites living in Humboldt County attacked a number of the local Indian villages. The Germanic barbarians endeavored to annihilate indigenous peoples in retaliation for cattle and other items taken in raids. Native men often were not in the village at the time of these attacks, owing to the fact that the whites preferred to wait for them to leave the villages before commencing hostilities. Let me repeat this shit. These scary ass motherfucking bastards. It says native men or Aboriginal men often were not in the villages at the time of these attacks, owing to the fact that the whites preferred to wait for them to leave before commencing hostilities. According to the San Francisco Bulletin, bands of white men armed with hatchets fell on the women and children, deliberately slaughtering them one and all. One witness to these atrocities counted 26 bodies of women and children in one camp. The bulletin discussed the victims of this mindless assault. Some of them were infants at the breast, one editor wrote, whose skulls had been cleft away again and again. The writers of this newspaper account was highly critical of the whites who participated in this carnage, referring to these cowards as the lowest and most brutal of the border population. The anonymous journalist asserted that the whites who precipitated the attack possessed nothing of humanity but the form and the bestial instincts, which is who they are. They're cave people, Germanic tribes. So here you have right here, a white militia in 1860 decided to invade a San Francisco Aboriginal tribe. But not only did they invade them, but they always decided to wait when the men were nowhere around. So they wait till the men are nowhere around, invade when there's nothing but old people, women, and children, and then just hack, rape, and kill everybody up. So didn't I tell you all on the previous tapes that a lot of these European Caucasian Christian Crusaders would always wait until the Aboriginal men were out either hunting or doing some type of activity to gather resources to bring back to their communities. And, they would plot against them. So they would always wait for the men to leave, okay? And then they would come in and to attack. And this is being written by a white journalist themselves. So you have a white journalist who even says that the writer of this newspaper account was highly critical of the whites who participated in the carnage and referred to them as cowards, as the lowest and most brutal of the border population, and they possess nothing of humanity but the form and the bestial instincts. That's interesting. So look how sick these bastards are. It was Aboriginal babies literally still at their mother's breast, and they were chopping the heads off of the babies as they were on their mother's breast. Let's continue. Now, I'm going into a next part because now I'm going to read to you all some of the actual written accounts. So I kind of went into a history right then on what was going on in the background. So basically, you got, gold, and you have the western part of the holy city of Jerusalem, which is Utah, California, New Mexico, that whole area over there. OK, why do you all think Las Vegas has the so-called Native American reserve? But anyway, so the holy city of Jerusalem, or the western aspect of the holy city of Jerusalem, which is the western part of North America, these people wanted to get gold and steal gold. So this is what caused a lot of the conflicts. And they were using the whole manifest destiny. They were using the Dum Diversas and all these other, things they were putting in their own heads to use as justifications and rationalizations to steal from Aboriginal people. So now I'm going to read into some of the accounts of what was going down. This chapter includes a series of documents that offer superb insight into the attitudes of whites towards the Native Americans of California. As Anglos moved rapidly into the gold rush, they brought with them racial prejudices towards the North American Indians. Over 200 years of interaction between whites and Native Americans shaped and influenced these views. By the time of the gold rush, most whites despised Indians. They considered the indigenous inhabitants of North America to be godless, barbaric, and savage. To majority of whites, Native Americans had no redeeming value and stood as barriers to civilization, quote unquote, and progress. Listen to this. This is very, very important, y'all. Please listen to what I'm about to say. This is very, very important. Please listen. In California, whites referred to Indians as diggers, a pejorative term closely related to nigger. Let me repeat. In California, whites referred to Indians as diggers, a pejorative term closely related to nigger. So these Christian Crusaders that was going out west were referring to Aboriginal and Indians as diggers, what sounds a lot like niggers, doesn't it? So they was using niggers as diggers. Now you understand what the slavery in the western part of America was all about. They were using them to mine the caves and to mine gold out of their own lands. That's right. All the Aboriginal Hebrew tribes of California, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, etc. They were using these Aboriginals that they were calling niggers as diggers to dig and mine the gold. So that's what they were using the brothers and sisters in the West for, as far as the perpetual slavery under the Dum Diversas, to mine the golds. Just like in the Far East around Virginia, the Carolinas, and Florida and Georgia, they was using the brothers and sisters for the tobacco and the cotton, etc. So this is what they was doing. So these people were bloodthirsty people, and it was always conflicts between us and them. Always. Since 1776. America has been in over 60 wars, y'all. Okay, I'm talking about formal wars. Most of these and I would say up until around, I want to say maybe like the Korean Wars, and around maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s. Those are the first times that you start to have Caucasian people more predominantly under the United States fighting against other Caucasian people. But prior to the Civil War, you had nothing but Caucasian crusading Christians fighting Aboriginal Americans. That's all it was. So I want to read you all some of these accounts. Okay. So let's see which one I want to go to first. So here we have one. This is in the Daily Alta, California, Sacramento City, January 18th, 1849, January 4th, 1849. Quote, "Yesterday we were all agog with a report which came in, that some wagons were fighting with some Indians at the fork of the road between here and the dry diggings, 3 or 4 miles this side of the log cabin at Green Spy. Some say a wagon broke down, and that while one of the teamsters went to get help on another wagon, the other stopped to guard the broken one. That some Indians came about and a fight arose. That the other teamster and some other men came up and a general fight took place. That the Indians ran, and that the whites burnt their rancherias, which it seems were near. Others say that the Indians had stolen an ox, and that the whites wished to punish them. The proof that they stole the ox is that his tracks were found leading to the rancheria, but were not found going away from it." So as you see right here, you have a situation in Sacramento where some of these Christian Crusaders, because once again, they never have a home, so they always on the road. But they, I guess, were trying to fix one of their wagons. And as they were fixing one, they were actually approached, and a fight was created and started by a group of Aboriginals out in Sacramento. Okay. Let's go to another story. On Sunday, oh, here we go. Daily Alta, California, January 20th, 1851. Los Angeles Correspondence, December 1850. So here we have one in LA. Okay. Now, I want you all to think, you know how in history you always hear about the so-called black man being blamed for raping a white woman and that being used as a justification, like in your Black Wall Street and stuff? Keep that in mind. On Sunday last, an Indian was brought into town and committed to jail, charged with committing a rape upon one of his female companions and afterwards killing her. The same night, a Sonaranian in this city was killed by a native Californian. This makes 11 murders that have been perpetuated in this vicinity within the last 3 months and few days. From murders to murderers, the transition to jail is easy. A few nights since no less than 12 prisoners escaped, making the third general jail delivery we have had within the last 2 months. Among the prisoners who have escaped are several of our most desperate criminals in existence. 3 of those concerned in the murder of Callahan, for instance. Another was under sentence for 5 years in the state prison for stealing horses. This is a bad state of things, all must admit, and is to be attributed to the want of energy on the part of our country court. There is no jail here, but an old building erected by Colonel Stevenson as a guardhouse. So what we have right here is a situation where an Aboriginal was caught. But you can see how they didn't really have a jail for him and stuff like that. And it was hard to kind of hold him. So a lot of these brothers was basically getting the hell out of there. And, locking them up for stealing horses. But it's interesting right here how they say he was brought into town for committing rape upon one of his female companions and afterwards killing her. So it almost makes me think, could this have possibly been a Caucasian woman he was with? Because I highly doubt they would lock a black man up for, let's say, attacking another so-called black female in the 1800s. I highly doubt that was happening. Let's see. Trying to find another story. Basically, it's a lot of just stories of, Aboriginals stealing their stuff, them trying to steal our stuff, them trying to come in and sexually assault our women, and then us attacking them in retaliation and killing 10 of their people. Really in a lot of these accounts, it's a lot of Aboriginals slaughtering and killing a lot of them up, believe it or not. That's kind of a lot more what I'm reading. Like, take this one, for example. So this was in San Diego, an atrocious murder city gas contract in San Diego, January the 14th of 1853. A murder of an atrocious character was perpetuated by some persons, probably Indians or Aboriginals, in this city during the past night. An inoffensive, though dissipated old tailor named George Warren, formerly a sergeant of New York Regiment of Volunteers, arrived here last evening from Los Angeles. He was seen during the evening in the various billboard rooms and other places of public resort in a state of intoxication. And early this morning, an Indian in charge of some sheep in the vicinity came in and reported that his body was lying in a ravine about a quarter of a mile from the plaza. On the spot, he was found stripped nearly naked, his clothes having been hastily concealed beneath a bush hard by, and his brains literally beat out. So you had this drunk cracker who was, I guess was at a bar, in 1853 in San Diego, and he was coming from LA. And I guess he was seen in a public area, drunk and stuff like that. So the next day, another Aboriginal found his dead body in a river. And they say when he found the dead body, he was stripped of his clothing and that his brains had literally been beat out. So you know how on Boys in the Hood, you want to see a dead body? Maybe it was on some shit like that. But let's continue. A jawbone of an ox lay near him, covered with blood, brains, and mangled matters of flesh and hair. He was at once removed to the city hall, and a coroner's jury was assembled, in whose presence a post-examination is now being conducted. Suspicion points to certain Indians last seen in his company, who undoubtedly murdered the poor wretch for the sake of the miserable clothing he wore. Our city is infested with a gang of Indian or Aboriginal thieves and murderers, who should be driven out or brought to condign punishment. It is the intention of our worthy justice of peace, Judge Franklin, to spare no efforts to discover the perpetrators of this foul and inhuman murder, and he may prove successful in his endeavors. So you see right here, an Aboriginal basically, well, it was a group of brothers. They caught this guy, publicly. He was in the public, he was drunk, and it looks like they took a jawbone on some Samson shit and literally beat his brains out. And they said that on the jawbone, it was mangled matters of flesh and hair, and it was covered with bloods and brains. Okay. But how they gonna say that the Aboriginals tried to take his clothes when they found the clothes concealed behind a bush? So that's sound like an excuse. Probably was a bastard that did something to one of us and they just came back and got his ass. So that's what I'm saying. Seeing a lot of these remarks, they would do something to us and we would retaliate. That's how a lot of it is. It's kind of almost like when you read about the Hebrews, and one of the Hebrew sisters basically was sexually assaulted by a person in an opposing tribe. And what did the Hebrews do? Of course, they retaliated. Okay, they retaliated. They used some trickery, which is a Blackbeard-like method, and they retaliated. So that's what So these brothers basically beat this guy's head in. Okay. Bodies found, California, April 18th, 1853. The discovery of 2 bodies bearing marks of foul play, having been resorted in their capture, were found near San Antonio Creek a few days since. They were Mexicans or Chileans and seem to have had their death from blows inflicted by an axe, supposed to have been murdered by the Indians or Aboriginals. So in most of these accounts that I just read you all, these actually were Aboriginals killing these Germanic, barbarian, European Christian Crusaders. Whether they were, calling themselves Chilean, Spanish, Mexican or whatever. But these Aboriginals in the West were not playing no games. Okay. And they were killing people. So these are the stories that they don't want a lot of you so-called black men to know about. Because this is you all. You all were doing this. These Indians that they're talking about, these are so-called black men. Okay. So as you can see, it's just always been us versus them. And it pretty much always will be. Pretty much always will be. And then, me just learning more of my history and just seeing that, all y'all been doing was warring with us and fighting with us, trying to come and steal our stuff, doing these fake ass land deals, and then turn around and try to sexually assault our women when we go and fish and stuff to bring back things to our community. Nah, fuck y'all. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't give a fuck about none of y'all. That's facts. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to wake up the damn Aboriginal Hebrew Americans. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to wake these people up. We've been getting fucked over way too long. So as y'all can see, man, these Aboriginal Indians, they weren't playing no games. Okay, they called themselves going out to California to get gold. Next thing you know, they were being scalped, had their brains beat out. They was being